Okay. So I just have a couple of quick slides here to give you an idea of where we're going to go and what we'll do today. And we're going to use this browser-based version of the ArcGIS software platform. So this is really neat. You can use this tool anywhere you have an internet connection. You can actually use this on a Mac for Mac people who get used to having to have two computers to use ArcGIS. This one can be used on a Mac, just anywhere you have a browser. So this uses the capabilities of living in the cloud to become this integrated collaborative GIS platform. So there's nothing to install on your machines, which is really great. And it's this platform where you can create and publish your own data, create your own maps. They also have 3D mapping capabilities called scenes. These applications you can build, so you can turn your maps and data into an application for a user that has some functionality to it. And so we'll do an example of that today with a story map, which is just one of the many different applications you can create there in ArcGIS Online. How many of you have used this already? A few people? We've set it up here at Clemson to work with your Clemson username and password to get access to this. So you don't need to create another username and password. It's linked to your Clemson account. So we'll today first get familiar with the ArcGIS Online interface, and then from there create a story map. And so what is a story map? This is a web application that combines your maps and data as a communication and storytelling tool. So you combine it with narrative text, with videos, with images, multimedia, other websites as a way to communicate, say, your research or your work or whatever your story is. So here, what differentiates it from something that's somewhat similar like Adobe Spark is that here the stories are generally linked to geography or location in some way and really uses the map as a storytelling device. And we'll take a look at some examples here in just a minute. All the tutorials and data that you need are at this web address. I'll just leave that up here for a moment. It says www.bit.ly/ClemsonGIS. This is our workshop and training page. It has all of our data and tutorials. And so I'll leave that up there another second. Is everybody on that page? All right. So you should be here once you've pulled that open. So what we're looking for is up here in the upper left corner, this GIS Fundamentals Workshop Series. If you attended the Field Data Collection workshop, you'll see the tutorials here. Underneath that is this Intro to Cloud Mapping and Story Maps. So if we click on that, this has as subpages all of the different activities we'll be doing today. And then there's two files here down near the bottom of this page, the CO2 emissions worldbank.csv and then CO2 emissions worldbank.zip. You can download both of those. I would, let's see, my thing's gone missing here. Here we are. I would, for those in the lab, navigate to the Data 2D drive on these machines, create a new folder. We'll just call it cloud_mapping. And I'm going to put my initials here at the end. And I'll save these two files there. So I'll go ahead and download this World Bank CSV. It's going to default to my downloads folder. So if I click here on my downloads, I'll see those two files. I'll select them both, copy them, and then paste them to that folder I created on the Data2D drive. So what was that called? Cloud Mapping BAL, and paste those two files here. So one of those is an Excel sheet or a CSV, comma separated values. The other one is a zipped directory that has a shape file within it with essentially the same data. So we'll add those to ArcGIS Online later on. Does anybody need to see any part of that again? All good? All right. So what I'd also like to show you before we move on is if you pull up a new browser tab, let's go to Story Maps. I can type it, storymaps.arcgis.com, storymaps.arcgis.com. And this is that Story Maps website. If you ever need to learn more about story maps, get inspiration, see examples, this is a great place to go. You can create story maps directly from this site, or what I'll show you today is how to create one from a web map we've created. So as you scroll down the page, you'll see they have a story map of the month, and then they have some example story maps here. And I've opened a couple of these already that I think are really neat. This mapping incomes one. If we open that one, it's going to pull this up here. So here's an example of a story map. As you pull this open, you notice that this is just a website. And so far, we haven't even seen a map, right? So this is telling us about income disparities in large cities across the United States. So what's really cool already, they've used this big eye-catching photo to draw in the viewer here. And we have this interface where we're scrolling up and down. And now we finally get into this map, this beautiful map of, it tells us, Chicago census tracts. And now is changing the map as we scroll to highlight different income or brackets and their location or geographic distribution all over the city here. And so as we scroll, different parts of the data are being highlighted to now tell us, say, this light blue color, we have a very rich area of Chicago and all of our rich suburbs, and then the less affluent suburbs or poverty-ridden suburbs here. And as we go, it's highlighting specific areas. And then also notice here in the upper right corner, we can go to different cities. I'm originally from the Detroit area, so I'm going to click on Detroit and go, and I see there's also this interface that's swiping back and forth as I scroll. So there's all sorts of really neat functionality that they've put in this website for this story map. Some other examples, let's see, I'll go back to my story maps page here, open my International Women's Day. That was yesterday, I think. But here's one, similar format here, but talking about health characteristics. Trying to find one with a different layout here. There's different templates for story maps. We'll do one called a journal today. There's also this Palm Springs map tour. I'll open this. This is another format of a story map here where it's linking a map and specific stops on a tour with photos. And as I click through, it's going to take me on this virtual tour. So from this page, you can create a story map if you Notice this section right here, get started right away, create story. This will prompt you. This is a really nice interface here that prompts you for either a format. You see we have a map tour map series here, or it asks you, what are you trying to display? So just keep that in mind. So these story maps are really a template for a website that we're going to create. What's really nice about them is there's no coding required whatsoever. So you just give it your text, you give it your images, you give it your maps, and it's going to construct all that for you. All right. So what we'll do today is we're going to create a few different web maps. We're first going to get familiar with this ArcGIS Online interface, add some data to the map, find the tools for symbology and analysis. We're going to embed our map in just a very simple Google site, just to show you how we can link a map we create in ArcGIS Online to something we could embed elsewhere. And then we'll create our story map from a series of maps. So first, I'm going to navigate to this prerequisites page here under the Intro to Cloud Mapping and Story Map. First thing we'll do is create a Google site. So this is where we'll embed the maps we create today, just to show you how you can embed a map to an external site. So what you'll actually need is a personal Gmail account. The g.clemson.edu accounts don't support creation of Google sites. So what we'll want to do is go to a browser, to gmail.com, and use a personal email address. Oops, I'm signed in here. I'm going to do this incognito for my own. So you're going to use your own personal Gmail. If you need to, you can sign up for one. I'll give a couple minutes to do that here. Remember my own password. Okay, and once we're logged in, we'll open up a new tab and go to sites.google.com. All right. Everybody logged into Google Sites? Who's still working on it? Did everybody get signed in? All right.
Yeah.
So once we're here, we're going to click Create in the upper left corner to create a new page. Almost. All right. Once we click create up here, we're going to, for today, we'll just use the classic sites. So the name for our site, we can give it something like my name and my GIS work. So something like Blake's GIS work. And we can leave this blank template here. I'll tell it I'm not a robot. And hopefully that URL hasn't been taken already. You see it's generating a URL here. If I click create, I may have already created this one in the past. Yep, it's not available, so I may add, I don't know, today's date or something, or March 2018. Modify that URL, and then click on create site. Looks like it's working.
I mean, it's going to enter permission. I mean, I got logged in. It's not this.
From click on exclamation point. Sites that Google. See if you log in there. If you're logged in 2 times, it might.
I don't know how to
So we'll just create classic sites. Just give it a name. What is GIS work? The month and year to give it a unique URL. Okay. So we won't dive too far into how to set up a Google site here, but this is our home page. As we add pages, they'll show up here on the left. This pencil icon in the upper right corner is our edit page, so we can modify what shows up on our home page. And there's also this create page, so we can add subpages to it. Let's see. I'm going to click on the edit page here and just type a little bit of text in the box. Something like, welcome to my site. Here you can check out the maps I created as part of the CCGT workshop. Just a little bit of explanatory text, and then I'll click save up here in the upper right corner. Next, I'm going to add a page beneath this one. So this would be my home page. I'm going to click up here in the upper right create page. And I need to give it a name. So I'll call it my map from ArcGIS Online. And then click on create up here at the top. No? Here's some automated news sites. And then I I just gave it some text. I created a new page on here. So just click save. My map from ArcGIS Online. So what we'll do, once we've created our map, we're going to grab some HTML code and then embed that map here so that anybody who visits this site would be able to see that map we've created. So right now I'll just save the page. Very bare bones, very empty, but that's okay. We'll give it some content later on. So here I have my home page, and then on the left I have this subpages beneath it, my map from ArcGIS Online. Everybody there? All right. So you can leave that open. I'm going to minimize my window since I had to be in incognito mode here. Now let's actually go to arcgis.com. I'm going to close some of these other tabs, tidy up a bit. And we'll open a new tab and go to arcgis.com, arcgis.com. And this is where you actually go to log into ArcGIS Online. So from here, we'll go to sign in the upper right-hand corner. And if you've ever signed into any ArcGIS product before, this process will be similar. What we want to do is sign in here, click where it says sign in with enterprise login. And then we need to type in our organization's URL. It's easy to remember. We just type Clemson in the box. So clemson.maps.arcgis.com, then click on continue. And you'll be prompted again how you want to sign in. You'll click on Clemson University. And then it'll take you to our standard sign-on page. You'll use your normal username and password. And then you'll get to our organization's homepage here. So everybody there? Here. All right. So what you should see is this, this picture here. This is actually some LiDAR from Clemson University's campus. Just a cool picture we put up. I'll point out here in the upper right corner, you should see your name. You can view your profile from here. I won't go to that. But here across the top, these are the main tabs or the main functionality of ArcGIS Online. So the gallery takes you to a gallery of data and web maps and apps. The map button will open the mapping interface. The scene button opens the scene interface, which is basically a three-dimensional map. So you can create 3D views and scenes. We have groups. Groups are it's where you can set up groups of users for sharing content. And then you also have your content tab. This is where any items, data sets you've published, any maps you create will live. And then the organization tab that tells you a little bit about the Clemson ArcGIS organization. So let's first click on content. So I've created all sorts of items on my account. I have lots of stuff here. If this is your first time logging in, you won't see anything really. But what we have here on the left under folders, this would be where maps and data sets you've published are going to live. So you can create subfolders to organize your content here. There's this button for adding items. So we can upload stuff from our computers or from an application. We can also create things instantly. So new layers, new maps and scenes or apps. Just want you to be familiar with this interface for now. Let's see. So now once we're all here, let's now click on this map in the upper left corner. And so this opens the map interface. So it's pretty easy to get around here. We can click and drag to move the map. You can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. There's also these plus and minus buttons here for zooming. If you're familiar with ArcMap and ArcGIS, you'll notice here on the left this panel where we can switch from the About to Content. And that gives us our table of contents for our map. So by default, when we open one of these, we'll have a base map preloaded. And so we have the topographic base map. If I click this little triangle, I can expand this layer and see what's within it. So here's my topographic base map layer. I can also switch on a legend. None of my layers have any legend properties set up, so that we don't see anything yet. So here in the upper left corner, there's our Add button. This is where we're going to go to add data and layers to the map. Next to that is the base map. So go ahead and click on that. This is going to have all the base maps from the gallery that we could add and use in our map here. So if you're familiar with ArcMap or ArcGIS, these should be familiar to you. We have things like our satellite imagery base map, a streets base map, topographic, which was our default. These dark gray canvas and light gray canvas are more subtle base maps. They're really good for mashing up with very brightly colored data. Things like our National Geographic map, oceans, which highlights our ocean basins here, OpenStreetMap, which is a crowdsourced map database, and so on. So for now, I'll just leave this as, I'll set it back to topographic. And let's add some data to the map. Does everybody feel pretty good about interacting with this? What do you think so far, especially for those who have used ArcMap a lot? Easy. Yeah, it's a pretty big change here. It's very clean in appearance. It's very easy to get around. I think if you're familiar with ArcMap, you'll be able to use this interface without even me really telling you how it works. But well, let's move on here. Let's add some data. So let's click this Add button in the upper left corner. It's prompting you for where you want to add data from. So let's search for layers. So within the search window, we can give it keywords in this find bar. And then this in drop down, this is where you tell it where to look. So the default is to look in my organization. So here we can search through data sets that have been shared by people here at Clemson University. If we click that drop down, and expand it, we have my organization. You can look on a specific GIS server. We could search through ArcGIS Online. So these are data sets that anybody with an ArcGIS Online account has made public or shared. And then there's also these living atlas layers. The living atlas is this really cool portal for all sorts of very high quality data from a variety of sources and a variety of themes. So this is a really great place to start if you're just looking for data to add to a map. We'll check out the living atlas in our next map. Let's just search through ArcGIS Online. So in my in dropdown, I'll go to ArcGIS Online. And in the find button, or the find box, let's type wind and weather. So we're going to check out a pretty neat data set. We're looking for current wind and weather conditions created by the user Esri. So if we click the name of that layer, click on current wind and weather conditions, we'll get a window that gives us a quick summary of what it is. So current wind conditions layer is created from hourly MEDAR data provided from NOAA. So MEDAR are these raw reports from weather stations all over the country and actually all over the world. If we click here on item details, it's going to open up this page with more information, a lot of metadata, or just more data about this layer. So it tells us that these are current wind conditions created from hourly MEDAR and buoy data provided from NOAA. We have lots of information about where it came from. And I was hoping it would say, yep, okay. And it tells us these are weather observations reported every hour. So these are not necessarily true real-time data, but they are near real-time data. So these observations are no more than 1 hour old. So I'll click back on the My Map tab here, go to my current wind and weather conditions layer, and then click Add. And then this layer will be added to the map with its default symbology, whatever the person creating the layer has set up for it. So in the lower left corner, I'll click on Done Adding Layers. And now I'm just going to zoom out, get a feel for the data here. I think it should cover, yep, may have to zoom in a bit. But here we're looking at, what does it look like these data are? What are we looking at? Wind speed, wind direction, right? So if I click my legend here on the left, I see I have readings from stations and buoys that have been symbolized the same way, where larger arrow means higher wind speed. And also as I go from green towards red in color, I have higher wind speed. So if I click on any one of these arrows, wait for it to load here, we get this pop-up window. So notice that each one of these stations, it tells you the date, the time, the wind direction and speed, gives you a reporting on the temperature and relative humidity, sky conditions, visibility, all the information you get in a typical MEDAR report. So I want you to notice how nicely formatted this pop-up is. So this is beautiful. It tells us the station name. Everything's well presented and easy to read. So all that information in the pop-up is actually being called from the data itself. So let's click back on our content panel here. And I'm going to expand this current wind and weather conditions layer. And I notice I have these two layers within a layer. I have one called stations and one called buoys. So it looks like my data are actually live as buoy readings or weather stations on land. So if I uncheck this box for buoys, I would expect to see all these offshore readings going away. Looks like they have, yep, there they go. But if I hover my mouse now over stations, I see all these different buttons pop up. So this first one on the left is Show Legend. If we click on that, it will give us a snapshot of the legend itself. And next to that is Show Table. So if we click there, we can open the attribute table for that layer. So now I can see that there are over 4,800 weather stations. I can see all that information that the pop-up was conveying to me. But I noticed that each one of these stations has a name, is recording air temperature, weather conditions, visibility, dew point, wind direction, air pressure, and lots of other stuff. So you can view the attributes for a layer by clicking that Show Table button underneath its name in the contents. And then we can close that table clicking here in the upper right corner on that X. So how do you guys feel about this layer symbology? It's all right. I mean, we can easily infer weather patterns from it. But notice that this data set is not just wind direction and wind speed. We had all sorts of other stuff in there. So we could potentially make a map out of air temperature or air pressure. So to change symbology, if I hover my mouse under that stations layer, I have this change style button. So if I click on change style, this is where I go to set up symbology for a feature layer. So the first option is choose an attribute to show. If no symbology is set up, when you add a layer to a map, it will default to this show location only. Right, so just show everything as points, just like we added this to ArcMap data frame. Here under choose an attribute to show, we can select any of the attributes from our table. So if we wanted to make a map out of air temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, we could click here. And now I get a really messy map because the first symbology it tries is this counts and amounts using size. So we've seen this before. It's changing the size of the symbol to indicate the air temperature. And I don't think that's a very effective symbology here. It looks like.
But this is current, why is it showing such high temperature?
Well, let's look at the way that our data have been classified. We have this really large symbol for anything above 65 degrees and an almost as large symbol for everything above 43 degrees, which at least currently seems to be most of the southeast and northeast as well are above at least 43 degrees Fahrenheit. So we could choose something like counts and amounts by color. Here on the left under selected drawing style, click select counts and amounts color. And now we just have the same point size or symbol size, but now we're modifying the color. So if I click on options, now I can customize that symbology. Right, so again, under counts and amounts color, I clicked on options. So if I wanted to change the color ramp, let's say I would click on symbols up here now. Click that word symbols. I could change the shape of that symbol here, or if I go to fill, it will show me all these different color ramps. And so I'll choose one going from, let's say, a light red to a strong red. Indicate low and high temperature. You can feel free to experiment with your color ramps here, find one you like. Since we're plotting a single variable, we'll generally choose a single hue gradational color ramp to indicate that. Notice we have a histogram of our data here, and it's showing us that the data are classified. So if you remember our classification methods, this is splitting up our data or grouping it in 5 classes using that natural breaks method. So our natural breaks method tries to find natural groupings in the data to put things together that are very similar and emphasize differences between groups. So we could reduce the number of classes, say make it 4 classes, and then view the result on the map here. We can change that if we wanted an equal interval. For instance, if we wanted to have the same value or temperature range in every class. We could do that. We could do the quantile to put the same number of points in every class, you know, the way politicians like to make everything look distributed. Kind of lie with our data a bit here. You can also set it totally manually and adjust these sliders yourself, or type in a number for those breaks. So if I wanted to break it, say 0, I could type that in here. And then maybe 32 to show those areas at or below freezing. And then, I don't know, 60 degrees all the way up to 107. And there's a slider here. You can change the transparency of your data from 0 to 100. But I'll go ahead and click OK. So what do you think, Joe? Is this map a little better than the first one we were looking at?
Makes some sense, yeah.
All right, so our other options, you know, we had that counts and amounts by size, counts and amounts by color. Our location is a single symbol or a type. So if you're trying to map something that's categorical and not quantitative, you would set it up by types, where you would have a unique color for every category. But I'll click here on Done now at the bottom to accept that symbology. So I'm not trying to hate on ArcMap, but compared to ArcMap, how hard was that? I mean, not night and day different, but certainly a lot simpler to work with, I think. Any other comments so far? Questions? All right. So I'd like to show you a few other really neat things about ArcGIS Online that it's possible to have with your data. Let's go to Add again. Let's add another data set. Click on Add, search for layers. And then find where it says wind and weather, let's go to type precipitation. And let's add this one called the National Weather Service Precipitation Forecast. So if I click here on its name, notice my preview shows this moving radar image. And so this tells me this is the precipitation forecast for the next 72 hours across the continental United States. So I'll click add that to my map, and then click on Done Adding Layers at the bottom. So what happened to the map?
Got some stuff.
Got some stuff. So what stuff? We have a new layer, but notice here at the bottom what shows up. Yeah, a time slider. So this layer has been time enabled. I'll just click the play button to start it going here. Time can be an attribute of your data just like anything else. And so you can use time information to filter your data based on its time and then animate really easily. So any time-enabled data you add to your map will automatically turn on this slider here at the bottom. You can customize or configure that slider by clicking this button here. If I wanted to make my playback speed faster, I could do that. And there's lots of other advanced options if you want to restrict the date and time range, the time interval, and so on. I'll just accept the defaults, click OK, and speed it up here. So how's South Carolina looking in the next 72 hours? What do we have coming in the weekend? Looks like we might get some rain. Right, and we can, go to our legend to see that symbology, try to interpret what kind of precipitation amounts we're looking at. And now this is really cool with the wind and weather data. If I wanted to quickly say, look at the relationship between air pressure and predicted precipitation, I can open my Symbology for my stations, go to that change style, switch my attribute from air temperature to altimeter pressure. I'll go to my counts and amounts by color again. Just click done, and then see if I notice any relationship here between pressure and precipitation. Seems like we still have a high pressure system here in the southeast that may be moving out. Anyway, I'm not a meteorologist. I'm just trying to point out how quickly we can change our symbology and mash up our data. So one other thing I'd like to show you here in this map is where you go to perform analysis. So if we click here on the analysis button in the upper left corner, this shows you all the available analysis tools through ArcGIS Online. One of the main drawbacks to ArcGIS Online is that it does not have nearly the same capabilities as the desktop version of the software. The analysis is pretty good in terms of what they offer, but if you do any sort of specialized work in ArcMap or ArcGIS Desktop, the tools probably aren't there if you use any of the specialized tool sets. But we have different options, ways we can summarize data. So here's that operation for joining features, which we're used to. We can find locations. So derive new locations is a way of performing overlay. We can create view sheds and watersheds and also trace things downstream. There's data enrichment. This is where you can take data out of, say, business and community analyst and append it to your own data, basically add new information. If you look at analyze patterns, you can calculate density, find hotspots and outliers, or interpolate points. Use proximity, we can buffer things. There's also routing and network, some very simple network analysis tools, but you can create drive time areas using real-time traffic data, which is pretty cool. And manage data, you can dissolve, extract, and merge layers as well as overlay. So some of those basic tools we've seen before in spatial analysis, things like buffer, overlay are there, but also some really neat features. A note about these tools, though, is that they consume credits on your account. Credits are a way that Esri monetizes your transactions on their software. So we pay Esri all sorts of money for a subscription to the service every year. And they say, you as a university have this many accounts to distribute amongst your users. Just having an account doesn't consume credits, but using analysis is one way of eating up your credits. Storing data is another way. So if you publish really large data sets and store them online, they will consume credits every day. Your accounts that you have through Clemson start with 1,000 credits, which is quite a few. I think on my own username, I'm down to maybe 600, and most of that is just from storage. Certain analysis tools will use more credits than others. Geocoding, for instance, is very, very expensive. If you perform geocoding in ArcGIS Online, you'll run out of credits within seconds, which is why we teach how to do it in the desktop in one of our workshops. Let's try out a tool just to see, just to get a feel for how we run our analysis. So what we want to do, let's try interpolating our temperature points. Let's just calculate for South Carolina. So, but what we want to do is take our weather station data and try to estimate the temperature distribution across the state. So I'll click here back on my details and go to the content. I'm going to switch off this precipitation forecast layer. And then up here in the upper right corner is this find address or place. So you can quickly go to a location here. I'm just going to type South Carolina. Go to my first prompt, South Carolina, USA. Whoops, click too many times. South Carolina. And I'm going to switch my current wind and weather conditions, my stations layer. I'll change the style and go back to air temperature. Counts and amounts, I'll just accept the default symbology that it gives me. So each one of these points represents a weather station. Let's see if we can interpolate or estimate the distribution of temperatures here across the state. Let's see. What we'll do is click here on our analysis tab to go back. And under here, the analyze patterns drop down, then we'll click on interpolate points. And if you want to learn more about a tool, there are these blue eye buttons next to it. And so it gives you a summary of what that tool does. So we'll interpolate points. We'll click on that button. The first thing we need to do is choose our point layer containing locations with known values. And so that will be our current wind and weather conditions. And then it says stations. We could use just our buoys, but we'll use our stations. Is everybody with me? I can go back if you need to see something again. So it was analysis, analyze patterns.
Did you do anything between zooming and South Carolina?
Oh, all I did was I turned off my Weather Service precipitation forecast. I changed the symbology back from pressure to temperature. It's not necessary you do that. But then I clicked on analysis and analyze patterns and interpolate points. And so again, my first option is my current wind and weather conditions. The choose field to interpolate. This is which attribute field we want to use. So I'll click in my dropdown, select air temperature in degrees F. Optimize for, there's lots of different options we could specify. We're just going to accept defaults. We'll change our resulting layer name. So there's this box down here. I'm going to delete all that text. And I'm just going to call it temperature underscore SC underscore interpolated underscore my initials. So this is going to create a new data set. Under my username, we can only have one name for a thing on our organization. So if you try to name your output temperature SC interpolated underscore BAL, it will give you an error and say this thing already exists. So use your initials so we hopefully have different names. There's this box here in the lower left corner, use current map extent. So if we leave that checked, it's only going to interpolate the points that are visible right now. We want to make sure we leave that on. But then notice there's also this show credits. So if we click here, it tells us before we even run it, how many credits this analysis is about to take off my account. So yours may be slightly different depending on your zoom level. I can see it uses 0.01 credits for every record or every point in the analysis. It will take 0.138 credits off my account. So I'll go from 1,000 to 99.87 or 999.87. So this is not a really expensive operation. But once you've set all these things up, click there on Run Analysis. It'll take probably a minute or so to run. And while you're waiting for your analysis, Renee went to Analysis here, and then, let's see, Analyze Patterns. You got it? Okay. And Interpolate Points. And make sure we're picking air temperature, and I'll save the name of my output. SC temperature, interpolated, my initials, and run the analysis. So what sort of pattern do you expect to see before it even comes up? Oh, don't look. It beat me to it. I thought it would take a bit longer. Yeah, warmer towards the coast generally. Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly what I see here. We are up in the light orange in the cold zone, increasing as we go. And if we view our legend, now we'll see the color scale applied to the data. And so this data set lives in your content now. This is something, a new feature you could add back to any map at any time.
But this is now only in a certain area, not all. Like the analysis was just for the frames and the.
Right. So remember when we said analysis, analyze patterns, interpolate, I used the current map extent. I did that because I wanted to restrict how many credits I used, how long it would take. If I wanted to do that for all the data, I would uncheck the use current map extent. And then let's see how many credits. It would take almost 5, which I have 1,000. It's not very many. If I was doing this over and over every day, I'd quickly eat up all my credits. But running it once, it's not so bad. So again, geocoding is one of the easiest ways to eat up all your credits without realizing it. If you ever use the business analyst or community analyst tools, they generate these really awesome reports. It's easy to do. That's another way of instantly eating up all the credits on your account without knowing. So, any other questions? Yeah. Well, let's save our map. So just like we would save a map document in ArcMap, we can click Save up here at the top. Click Save and then click Save again. And so we need to give a map a title and a tags and a summary. So our title, I'll just call it Temperature Distribution Map. Distribution map, and I'll say by, again, my initials. We need to have unique names for things across the organization. Tags, these are descriptive keywords that help both you find stuff you've created or other people search for it. So here I'll just put weather, type weather, and then hit the enter key, allows you to add another tag. Precipitation, temperature. In my summary of the map, I'll put near real-time weather data. And then we have our save in folder. If you have specified or created any folders in your content, you could choose those here. The default is to just put them under your usernames folder, which I'll do, and then click Save Map. Mm-hmm.
Will the interpolated file update as the real-time database?
No, it's been a static calculation. The interpolated data set won't update.
So if you want an updated one, you have to go another interpolation process.
Yes. Yes. And if you were doing that a lot, I'd point you towards like writing a script that calls that same data in a desktop and generates the data over and over again. Because that won't consume credits and be easier than going and manually doing it over and over. Other questions? Did I see any? Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, now that we've created a map, let's go back into our content. So I'll click here in the upper left corner where it says home, and then click on content. And again, I have way more stuff than most of you probably do, but I see this feature layer that I created. It has this yellow icon. So this is that SC temperature interpolated surface. And then I also see this web map that I just saved. And if I click on these, say on my temperature distribution map, I'll view those item details. And so here's that summary I gave my map. I can add a description for it. I can also see what layers are in that map. And here on the right, I could reopen it in the map viewer. I can also open it in ArcGIS desktop or create a web app from it. And then there's also this share button. So if I click here on share, there's different levels or permissions I can allow. So when I first create a layer or map or anything, the default is only I can see this item. If I wanted to make anybody with Clemson credentials able to see the map I've created or this data set, I could check the box here and say Clemson University. Then anybody with a Clemson University account could potentially find it. Or if I click on everyone, public, this map would be viewable by anybody in the world, theoretically. And there's also these things called groups. So these are a subset of users at Clemson where you can share particular content with specific people or a group of people. So I'll just click here, share with everyone, public, click OK. And then it gives you this message that says, hang on a second, there's a layer in your map that's not shared the same way. That interpolation result we just created is still private. So do you want to update sharing and share that layer publicly? So I'll click update sharing here. So once you've logged in, you can always go to your content and then find maps or data sets that you've created and modify them again. All right. So that map was just going to orient us with the ArcGIS Online interface, get us comfortable with adding data and where we need to go to perform analysis. We're going to create a few different maps, and these will become the basis of a story map for us. The format for a story map, we've seen a few different layouts here. The format we're going to create is similar to this one. This is a really great example of what's called a story map journal. And the journal is a format that has these stops shown here on the right, where we have this large main stage that we fill with images or video or maps, and then this side panel where we add text or other content. And we set up a series of stops or sections in a journal where we go from place to place in our story, or just section to section. So this one's talking all about how humans have modified the earth here. And for every section, I have an interactive map that's showing me some different parameter. And as I click around through the story, I notice my map changes. So we're going to create something similar, not quite so in depth, but we'll create some simple maps to show different climate-related parameters. So, and then we'll create our story map journal similar to this one. So I'll go back to my content tab here and then click the map button in the upper left corner. And what it's done is it's opened up an existing map, whichever one I was last working on. I can create a new map up here in the upper right corner, click New Map, and then Create New Map. Everybody there? Okay. So first I went to my content. That's where I was before. But then I clicked on Map up here in the upper left corner to open up that map viewer again. And so mine reopened that map I was just working on. I'll click New Map in the upper right and then Create New Map. And it's telling me, hey, you've made changes without saving. I'll click yes, open the map. I already saved everything I need from before. So this first map we're going to create is going to show us areas that would be inundated by rising sea levels up to 3 feet. And so we're going to focus on the Charleston area. So first, let's use this find address or place box and search Charleston. Charleston, SC. And that zooms me in. And let's see, I'm going to add some data. So I'll go to my Add button next in the upper left corner and search for layers. And I'm going to search in ArcGIS Online. So go to my dropdown, change from my organization to ArcGIS Online. And then I'm going to search for sea level rise. Click on Go. And we are looking for this one called 3-foot sea level rise by user SLR Noah, or sea level rise Noah. So I search for sea level rise. I'm scrolling down my results. I find 3-foot sea level rise. If I click that, let's view those item details. Anytime I'm going to add a data set that I didn't create to a map, I want to check out these item details to learn more about the data. So here, this shows me, it's going to show potential sea level rise inundation of 3 feet above current mean high water. And this data set was created by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who I hope I can trust as a data provider. So I'll switch back to my map and then click Add for that layer. And then I'll click on Done Adding Layers. So what are we looking at here? If I go to my legend, I see this SLR depth, or sea level rise depth, goes from low in lighter blue to the highest potential in dark blue. And then these bright green areas are low-lying areas. So what that means is that they're not hydrologically connected, but they're low enough that if sea levels rose by 3 feet, they would potentially flood. Is anybody from the Charleston area? Really? I'm almost always guaranteed somebody is. That's a little. If you've ever been there, what's your favorite place? Let's see if it'd be inundated. Isle of Palms. Let's see if I can find the Isle. I remember exactly where it is. Yeah. Looks like people right on the beach would be okay, but those on the back side of the dunes might be inundated a bit. I'm also going to change my base map. And this is it's a very strongly colored base map. I think what would look really nice would be, say, the imagery, help us identify potentially specific landforms or notice other patterns. The other thing I'm going to do is change the transparency of this layer. So if I go back to my content up here and click these three buttons or the three dots for more options, I get a menu, sort of like if I right click on a layer. And then I'll click on transparency and adjust this. So as I drag the slider, I can go to fully transparent, or I'll set it maybe somewhere around between 25 and 50%. And now I can see much better specific roads or neighborhoods or areas that will be covered. And is there anything else you notice about this data set? Say if you zoom in too far. It disappears. And the reason for that, I'll just switch back to the item details here. And it tells me that this is what's known as a tile layer. It's the way most raster data is provided in ArcGIS Online is as tiles, which are basically pre-rendered pictures for a location and a zoom level. Rather than loading and reloading a raster data set all the time and pulling it off of a server, it just grabs a picture that's been compressed and is much faster to draw. And it tells me the tiles only go to the scale of about 1 to 18,000. So if I zoom in beyond that scale, there's just no tile, no picture to put on the map. But for very, very small scale mapping, say at the city, state, country, or even continental level, that's totally appropriate. But I'll go back to Charleston here, pull it back into my view. Sure. See, Bo, which part did you need to see again? You're caught up? Okay. All right, so this is going to be the first map we'll use in our story map. Let's go ahead and save it. So I'll click save here at the top and then save again. And I'm going to call this sea level rise in Charleston. And also put by and my initials, BAL. You can substitute your initials there. And we'll give it the tag sea level rise, Charleston, climate change. And a description of the map. A map showing sea level rise in Charleston, South Carolina. And then I'll click save. And then I'm going to click this share button up next to save. So here I can adjust the sharing settings for a map. I'll click here to make this public. And notice I have these options down here, embed in a website or create a web app rather. So we'll click on these from a different map. There's also a link directly to the map. So when I've made this public, it will generate a URL for your map. So if I copy and paste the URL and put it in another tab, notice I'm no longer signed in. Up in the upper right-hand corner, it doesn't have my username here, but anybody who has that URL can go view your map. They can interact with it. They can turn layers on and off and change the base map. So they still have a very functional map, even though they're not signed in. So you can create maps, share them publicly so that anybody can at least view your data or your your map. So I'll switch back to my map here, my sharing settings, it's public. I'll click on done. And we have the first map we'll use in our story map. Any questions? No, I think now's probably a good time to take a break. We'll break for 12 minutes or so, meet back at 35 after. I think that's the time. Guess my clock's a little fast in the room. But yeah, we'll meet in 13 minutes at 35 after. Nope, we're just about to get started again here. I was showing another student something, who's asking questions. Okay, yeah, we'll get started in just a second. Okay. Everybody still feeling good? Ready to continue on? Right. Let's, we've created a couple of maps now. We created our sea level rise in Charleston map that we've already saved. We shared it and made it public. We'll create a couple more maps here. So from this interface where we have our map open of sea level rise, let's click on new map in the upper right corner and create a new map. And click on yes, open the map. I've already saved all the changes. So with this next map, let's just browse our living atlas layers because these are a really cool source of data. So let's go to add, our add button here, and click on browse living atlas layers. So what we have here is on the upper left corner, we can click a drop down and notice there's all these different categories of things. So we have imagery, both aerial, multispectral, temporal or imagery over time. We have additional base maps you can load, historical maps. There's demographic and lifestyle data, things like income, population data. All sorts of landscape information. So climate and weather, ecology and species, elevation, land cover, soils, geology, natural hazards. We have oceans. We have urban data. So transportation, planning information, 3D cities, a specific transportation category here, boundaries and places. So for things like political maps, state, country, boundaries and so on. So there's all sorts of really great data here. I'm just going to kind of click through a few examples. If I go to my base maps, whoops, not event imagery, but base maps, and I go through these pages, I'll see a lot of the ones I'm already familiar with, but the further I dig, the more cool stuff I can find. For instance, this world hillshade, that one's a really neat. So if I click it under any of these, I can add this as a layer or I can add them as the base map and replace the base map. So for now, I'm just going to click add as base map and then close this window. And this is a hill shaded elevation data set. So it doesn't look like a lot. It's a little bit washed out, but if you usually work with natural data and like to show a hill shaded terrain model underneath your data or as a base layer, this is a really, really great tool. You don't have to calculate any hill shades yourself. I'm going to go back and browse more living atlas layers, go through my base maps. I saw one that's also pretty neat, the world firefly imagery. I'll add that as a base map. Or there's one in particular that I'm looking for. There's things, if I go to group number 7, there's this newspaper style that I can add as a base map that uses a symbology now where it looks like it's printed out on a newspaper, right? With all these individual dots that they use in newspaper printing. Gives it a totally new theme or new style of a map. And these were all just from my living atlas layers looking through the base maps here. So feel free to poke around for a minute if there's any particular type of data you're interested in. You know, my background's in geology. I'll check out my soils and geology layer. Say my USA geology units. And if I click on any one of these, it tells me a bit of information about it, right? So here in South Carolina, we're in these crystalline Blue Ridge rocks. That actually gives me a specific unit and an age. So there's really lots and lots of really cool information in the living atlas layers. If I want to remove any data set from the map, I can click those 3 dots for my more options and select remove. And it'll prompt me and ask, are you sure you want to do that? If I switch my base map from the gallery here, say go back to topographic, I can go back to any of these base maps at any time. So what we're going to do is let's add a precipitation layer from our living atlas layers. So I'll go to add and browse living atlas layers, and I'll select all categories here, and then just search for precipitation. If you notice those current wind and weather conditions, that's where I got these before. I just realized I'm reading my wrong notes for this section. We're going to go to add and search for layers. I'll close that browse living atlas layers window and search in ArcGIS Online for precipitation. And I'm looking for one called total annual precipitation. The username is eBarona_CAIT. So maybe I'll type total annual precipitation. There it is. Now I'll click add. And done adding layers. So I'll switch over to my legend. Here we have total annual precipitation in millimeters. I have this really striking, really beautiful data set. So this will be the basis of our second map that we're going to add to our story map, just to show precipitation patterns over the world. I'm going to switch my base map to the oceans. I feel like that contrasts very nicely with my data. And then I'll click save at the top and save the map I've created. So save, click save again. And I'll call this map total annual precipitation. Give it the tag precipitation. And a description, a web map showing precipitation across the world. Oh, yep, thank you for reminding me. Need to add our initials so we don't try to save an item with the same name. So then I'll save my map here. And the next map we're going to create is going to have some CO2 emissions data that we got from the World Bank. So the World Bank maintains a database of CO2 emissions per country, starting in, I think, the 60s. And our data set that we downloaded from here goes up to 2013. So let's create a map out of those data. What I'd like to do is show you two different ways of adding data to ArcGIS Online. If you remember, we downloaded some data from the website at the beginning. We have this CSV, comma separated values, basically a spreadsheet, which I'll just open to show you here in Excel. And then there's this zip file, which has within it a bunch of files. And if you're familiar with GIS data by now, you'll see they all have the same name with different extensions, which tells me that this looks like a shape file. So this table has within it country information, both the names as well as some population information. And then as we go, it has the years starting in, let's see, 1960 all the way to 2013. It has carbon emissions, and the units here are metric tons per capita. So we have this as a table, which I'll close here without saving my changes. And then I'll also show you from Arc Catalog. I have it on the wrong screen here. You don't need to open Arc Catalog to see this, but I'll just show you here. I connect now to that folder, my data to cloud mapping BAL. Let's see, you'll each need to open your Windows Explorer where we have that zip archive, right click on it and say extract here. So we're going to unpack that zip archive. And then here in Arc Catalog, now I see, yep, that was a shape file. And by previewing the data, I see I have country polygons. And if I preview the table, I see all that same attribute information I was looking at in the table. Oops. So there's lots of ways we can add data to ArcGIS Online from our desktop. First, what we'll do is publish that shapefile as a service from ArcMap, and then we'll add it directly as a table and kind of compare and contrast the results here. So if you haven't already, let's open ArcMap. And first I'll make sure, did everybody extract this zip archive that we downloaded before? So I have on my local machine in my Data2 drive, this cloud mapping BAL folder. I've extracted that zip archive. And now I'll open ArcMap.
You click extract here?
Yeah, I clicked on extract here.
Okay.
Yep. You can do extract files and select a folder, and that'll put it in a folder beneath this one. Bless you. So already, as I wait for ArcMap to open, already what's the primary difference between our two data sets that we're going to publish? Like if I were going to add one to ArcMap, or if I wanted to add both of them to a map, can I? Yeah, one's just a table, right? So we have some geographic information in a column. We know which country that this is associated with, but it's not a true GIS data set. There's no geographic component. So the shapefile has that information. So So once I've got ArcMap open here, I'll close my Business Analyst Desktop Message Center, maximize my windows here. So yeah, we have two different data sets. One already has a geographic component, one doesn't. So the way we add it to a map or the way we're able to publish it is going to be a bit different. Does everybody have ArcMap open? All right, so what do we need to do first if we want to add that shapefile with our CO2 emissions to the map? Let's set up a folder connection. I'll expand my catalog here on the right, pin it to keep it open, and I need to right-click my folder connections, connect to a folder, expand the computer and data to D drive where you all created that folder called Cloud Mapping with your initials. Connect to that folder. I'll expand it, wait for it to load the contents, and then I'll drag and drop that shapefile into the data frame. All right, here's that CO2 emissions World Bank shapefile, drag and drop, and I'll right click and remove these business analyst network barriers. Everybody there? Raise your hand if you're not. No, we're all good? All right. So we have this shapefile. It's living here on my machine. Let's publish it as a service to ArcGIS Online. So the way we can publish our features, we first need to click the File menu and sign into ArcMap. So we click File in the upper left-hand corner, click on Sign In. And we're going to do those same steps, sign in with our enterprise login. And we'll type Clemson in the box and sign into clemson.maps.arcgis.com. Click Continue. Sign in using Clemson University. If you get this error about scripting, you can just click Yes. Type in my username, password, and then log in. So to share this as a service, we'll again go to our File menu, click on, or hover our mouse on Share As, and then select Service. And so we're going to publish a service. We'll click Next. And here we need to choose our connection. In the drop down at the top where it says Select an Existing Connection, we want to click on My Hosted Services, Clemson University. And then we need to give this a name. So our service names need to be unique, just like all of our other stuff in ArcGIS Online. So I'll call this CO2 emissions _ by _ country, and then give it _ my initials. And Bo's asking, where do we sign in? It's from the File menu. Copy this here. I'll cancel. You got it. So File, Sign In here, and you'll sign in using those same steps. Yep. And then once you're logged in, we'll go to File, Share As, Service. And so we're publishing a service. Select My Hosted Services at Clemson University. I called it CO2 emissions by country with _ my initials. And then I'll click on continue. So the parameters, we can leave the defaults here under capabilities. We're going to publish and leave this as feature access being checked. So a feature service on ArcGIS Online is, you could think of as being vector data. So it has an attribute table that you can query and use to drive the symbology. If you check the box for tiled mapping, this will also create a tile layer, which again is just this basically a picture of your data. So it will generate a picture using the symbology you've applied here in ArcMap and then publish that to online.
But then you can't manipulate it.
You can manipulate it, you can add it to a map basically as an image, but you wouldn't be able to query it, change the symbology, or do anything. So if you're publishing raster data, the only way you can do it to ArcGIS Online for now is tiles. So we'll leave feature access checked and tiled mapping unchecked. If we go to our feature access options here, the default is to query, so anybody can query the attributes. So if you remember, if you attended a field data collection, you'll know if we check these boxes, that would enable people to create new features, delete features, sync or update. So basically make changes to your data set. So do you think we want to enable any of these things? Probably not, right? I don't want people to be able to delete countries out of my data, change values in the table, draw new polygons, or do anything else. But I would like people to be able to query my data. So next, for item description, we need to give it a summary and tags. If you haven't noticed yet, every item you create in ArcGIS Online needs this information at a minimum. So I'll say this is CO2 emissions by country from 1960 to 2013. And tags, I'll have CO2 emissions. And the sharing, again, the default is to just have it under your content. We'll check the box for everyone public. And you've seen where we can go to change that later if we need to, but we'll make sure this says everyone and public. And next we want to click this Analyze button just to make sure that there's no high severity things that prevent us from publishing. So hopefully you don't have any. Then we can click Publish. And this is going to package up our data, upload it to the cloud, along with this thing called a service definition, which is just a file that lists all the parameters you use to create this thing. And let me know if yours does not publish. Generally, every time I do this, at least one person's doesn't work. So who's it going to be today? Wasn't me. It says mine published successfully.
Packaging succeeded, but publishing failed.
Packaging succeeded, publishing failed. Try it again. And if that doesn't work, save the map document. We'll close our map. Okay. Sometimes you have to fight with it for a while. Okay, and Bo, do you need to see any of those steps again? Brian's published, all right. Okay, well, somebody in the room needs to publish again. Once yours publishes, you can go to ArcGIS Online. Now I have way too many tabs open. I'll go to the tab where I was just working on that total annual precipitation map. I've already saved this one, so I'll click here in the upper left corner, go to Home, and then Content. And now I see all these maps I've created before, that temperature interpolated layer, but now is the CO2 emissions by country, this feature layer, as well as a service definition. So this is a file that gets created along with every feature service. You won't really work with it directly. And if you click on that layer, you'll see a thumbnail of your data frame. When you published it up here, you'll see your summary. Any tags you gave it will be down here. And notice the layer name, the CO2 emissions World Bank, is exactly the same as what that layer was called in the data frame, in the table of contents. So my layer name could be different. My layer name could be different than my feature service name. Another note, something I'll point out, is that if you had multiple layers in your data frame here in ArcMap, you can publish them all together as one single service. So you would have one item in your ArcGIS Online content. If I can find my mouse here. You could have one service or one feature layer that has multiple layers within it, or multiple data sets packaged together. So every time you add that service to a map, it could potentially add multiple data sets. See, Renee, was yours able to work?
It did now, yeah.
It did? Okay, great. Everybody else got theirs published? All right. So let's go back to our content here. And I want to show you now the other way another example of a way you can add data to ArcGIS Online. So from the content page, near the upper left corner is this add item. If we click on that, we can select from my computer to add a file and upload it from the computer. So now we're going to choose that CSV file that we downloaded before. So I'll click on choose file. I'll go to my D drive, to my cloud mapping BAL folder. And I'm just going to select that CSV, so CO2 emissions worldbank.csv. And then click on open. A CSV file with the file name. Oh, because I did this the other day. Did anybody else get this error? Okay. Give me 1 second to rename mine or delete my other one from a minute ago. Sorry about that. CO2 emissions. There it is. Settings. If you ever need to delete an item from ArcGIS Online, you open up the item details, go to the settings tab. There's a box here, which is really great if you make mistakes a lot. You can prevent yourself from deleting things accidentally, where it basically asks you 2 or 3 times if you want to delete it. Or you can click here on delete item. I'll say yes. So now let's see if I can add an item from my computer. Grab that CO2 emissions CSV file. Okay, so everybody sees this window now? Okay. So the files here, the title you're going to give to that service you create is going to be here. So I'll say CO2 emissions World Bank, and I'm going to type underscore CSV underscore my initials, just to differentiate it here. And my tags, carbon dioxide emissions, And I want to leave this box checked that says publish this file as a hosted layer. If I uncheck that, it's just going to save my CSV on ArcGIS Online. But I want to create a data set that goes in a map.
Can you adjust that later? Or do you have to?
You can go, you could do this process again later, yep. If you upload a spreadsheet or CSV, you can publish it later out of your content. So if we scroll down, there's this option, locate features by, right? So if you remember back when we were creating data from tables, we did it both by coordinates. So using latitude, longitude, there's also addresses or places. Or we're basically going to geocode these things. So we had a field in that table. I can pull it back up here, the country name field, or CNTRY_name. So let's use that as our address or place. And notice when I select that, my options change. I have this option for in. So what is the geographic extent that these addresses or places are in? I want to select the world, or the word world. And then I need to specify which one of these attributes from the table is going to be used. So if I scroll down, I'm looking for that country name field, and next to it, under location fields, I'll click in the drop down and select the option country. So again, country name is my field. In the drop down, I want to select country. And then I just want to make sure it hasn't read in another field and is going to try to use it. I don't see one. Okay.
What is the field type?
The field type, it's reading in what it is. So is it text, is it numeric? Or is it a string, an integer, or a double? So all of those year data, all the emissions data, it's going to store those as a floating point number. So everybody here, go ahead and click add item then. Location field not fully specified. Did I do something wrong, or is everybody getting this error?
You did it wrong.
I did it wrong. Okay,
Just you.
good.
Don't worry about it. Don't take it.
Oh, somehow I unselected my country and then click add item. It's okay if it's just me. If that problem happens for everybody, then it's more serious. So what it's going to do now, yeah, if you had that error, maybe double check that you set the country name field as locating to country. So what it's going to do now is create this feature layer service, and then it's going to prompt you to review these locations. So basically check that it matched the location to something in the world. So it says 202 of 206 locations were matched. Do you want to review them? I say yes, definitely. So here is my unmatched 4 in total. And if I click on any of these, say St. Vincent and the Grenadines, under country name, it's going to give me potential locations through its geocoding service. So if I click now on the left in this table, starting at the top, it's going to show different potential locations. So I definitely don't want to select the third one, some embassy in Washington, D.C. I want to select the actual location in the Caribbean. So that first option. And then I can click match, and it will assign the point to that location. And I can do the same for these others, the British Virgin Islands, are down in the Caribbean, I'll match there. Northern Marianas Islands in the South Pacific, say match. And the Gaza Strip, I'll match. So now I have all 206 rows in my table have matched to a specific country. So what's already different between the data set we published out of ArcMap and this data set here?
Click on these points.
Yeah, this is storing them as points. So we don't have polygons we can symbolize directly. We're representing each nation with a point. So an advantage to adding shapefiles or geographic data sets is we can preserve that geographic information. Here we're essentially just geocoding a description of a country to a point on the map. So once you've updated your locations, you can click on Done Reviewing here in the lower left corner. And this is going to be now the basis for our third map that we'll put into our story map. So let's see, let's click on one of these points and view that pop-up window. So how does that compare to the ones we saw earlier with that wind speed data? How excited are you to look at this pop-up window? Right, this is the default pop-up style, is that it just shows every attribute title in your table and the value for that specific point, which can be beneficial if you think the user or viewer of your map needs to know every single value here. But generally, you want to format your pop-up and not just have a laundry list of everything here. So what we'll do is we're going to remove most of this information. Most of these fields people don't need to see. We'll preserve things like the name of the country, the population, and then we'll show the CO2 emissions from 1960 to 2013 as a graph in the pop-up window. So we'll just summarize all of this information in a much easier to digest way. And then we'll symbolize, change the symbology here. So to modify the pop-up window, we hover over our layer over in our content, click on More Options, those three dots, and then click Configure Pop-up. So you can turn your pop-ups on and off by checking or unchecking that Show Pop-up box. And here we can give it a title. And so the title by default is the name of the layer. Let's just delete that. And here, this plus sign, we can add a field name or even a customized expression. So if we click this and then select country name as our field, notice it gets added in these braces here. So it's just going to list the name of that country as the title of the pop-up. Under pop-up contents, where it says display, the default again is listing field attributes. You can customize using coding and expressions and make this fairly complex. We'll leave it as a list of field attributes, but click here where it says configure. And now here on the left is this checkbox to display. So if you want to display any of these attributes, you would leave them checked. Let's check here in the display at the top and then check again to uncheck all of these at once. But let's leave our check the box next to our population country field. So under the field alias column, you can click next to any of these and type in a new alias. So generally, you not want to leave something like this for the viewer. You'd want to type in something more nicely formatted. And I'll call this total population. And then I'll click OK. So we're just going to show our total population field. And if I scroll down on the left here, it says pop-up media. And I can click add and then click on line chart. So there's lots of different options. You could do image, pie, bar, column, or line charts. So here we can give that chart a title. We'll call it emissions from 1960 to 2013. And then I'll give it the caption from the World Bank, or maybe source World Bank. And then I'll go down my list of fields here and start checking the box from 1960 all the way down to 2013. Almost there. A few more years. All right. Then I can click OK, close that configuration, and then click OK again. And now as I click on any of these, I see the title is simply that country name, tells me the population, and now I have this really cool chart showing their emissions. So it also gives me a pop-up or a little bit of information there in the line chart. So I see somewhere in the late 80s, Mauritania had this crazy spike in CO2. That's interesting. You know, the United States, we were increased heavily until about 1973 and have been on the decline. But now, every time I click on one of these, I have this really cool display. I don't see a laundry list of attributes. I see this nicely formatted pop-up. So one of the easiest ways to really improve on a web map that you share with the public is to spend a bit of time configuring pop-ups. Everybody got that working? Any questions? All right, so let's set up our symbology here. I'll hover my mouse, go to change style. And let's just symbolize the last year of data. So year 2013, and my choose an attribute to show. And I'll leave it with counts and amounts by size. I'm just going to change the color slightly. So I'll click on my details, change my symbol, maybe a more reddish orange here. I hover my mouse, click on change style under the layer name. And for choose an attribute, I selected year 2013. And then from counts and amounts by size, clicked on options. And then I'll say done. And I'm going to change my base map to the dark gray canvas. Again, this is a really nice base map to use if I'm using very brightly colored information. And now I'm going to save my map. I'm going to change the zoom and location to something like this. And then click Save at the top. Save. I'll enter a title for the map. CO2 emissions in 2013 by BAL, my initials. I'll give it the tag CO2 emissions. And my summary, CO2 emissions in metric tons per capita. And then save the map. And then I'll click share at the top and select everyone and make it publicly viewable here. And I see that same dialog. I need to update the sharing, so I click OK, or update sharing and then click done. All right, everybody there? So we have 3 maps now. We're going to create a story map out of these. So the way you can easily start with a map and create a web application like a story map is click that share button from the top and click here where it says create a web app. And here you would select a configurable app. There's 70,000 pages of configurable apps to choose from. I'll just point out at the top, there's also this thing called the Web App Builder, which is a way of adding widgets and customizing to make your own app. Let's go to configurable apps though, and we're going to search for the journal. So we'll type the journal here, and then I think on the second page, there's this one in the lower right corner, the story map journal. So then we'll click on select and create web app. And so again, we need to give it a title, tags, and a description. So I'm just going to call this climate change story map by my initials. Give it a tag, CO2 emissions and climate change. And my summary story map journal showing climate related maps. Bless it. Then I'll click on done. And it's going to open the map journal builder here. So if you remember the format for this thing, we're going to have a main stage and then a side panel. It's asking us if we want a side panel to have it docked here on the left for all of our text, or a floating one that could be in different locations. We can customize that later. We'll just leave it selected as side panel and click on start. And so it first asks us what title we want to give it. So this title is going to show up in the upper left corner of our story map. So I'll call it Climate Data Maps by Blake. And then once I click this next arrow, it's going to quickly show me the different components of this map journal, right? This is the main stage. This is the side panel. And then I need to set up each section. So we're going to set up these sections of stops that we can navigate through from our side panel. So first we need to set the main stage content. With the story map journal, or pretty much any story map, you generally don't start with a map. You want to give it either a video or a photo or something that really draws in your viewer, grabs their attention. So I suggest we start with an image, and we just want to get a very attention-grabbing image. So you can upload photos, you can link to Flickr, or you can just give it a URL to an image, which we'll specify. So we're going to grab images from Google image search for this example. So I'm going to open a new tab and just search Google for climate change, and then search images. And under tools, I'm going to set my size to be large. I want a large and high resolution photo. So you can choose whichever one grabs your attention here. Perhaps this one from NASA. And from the preview here, I can right-click on an image. And what I want to do is copy the image address.
I didn't end up in the map. I don't know what I did.
Okay. Go back there. So I see the two issues. From here, search it up. So yeah, pick your favorite picture there, right click on it from the preview and select copy image address. And if I go back to my map journal, I'm going to reorder my tabs here. If I click on image, then click on link, I'm going to paste that here. And what I'm looking for is to make sure that URL ends with a .jpg, .png, or something. If it doesn't, you're not linking directly to a photo. And you need to try a different image. And for the position, we'll leave it as fill. So it's going to fill the main stage. And then click on next. So is everybody there? All right. I'll click next. And then we need to set up the side panel. So the side panel is going to have text. We can also embed images or videos or even other websites here on the side panel.
Go back and just select the picture on Google.
Yep, so you have your picture here. So I right-clicked and copy the image address. And then from the image, I said link and then pasted it here. Yep, and then said next. So what we're going to do in the interest of time today is we're just going to copy and paste a bunch of information from NASA. So I'm just going to Google climate NASA evidence and go to this first page that comes up. And I'm just going to copy and paste a paragraph here. Don't ever do this in your academic work, right? But I'll copy and paste some text. I'll paste it here, and I'll at least say source NASA. Just to put some text in this space. So we can also do things like add photos. So if I click just before the word "the" here, I'll add a line and go back up. Go back up to the start here, but then I'll click here where it says insert an image, video, or web page, this camera icon. And here I see the same options I had before. I'm going to copy the link to this image just by right-clicking it and say copy image address. And I'll go back to my map journal, specify a link, and then paste that link. And then click apply. So now I can see my side panel will have that image as well as some text. And then once I click add, now I have, this would be the landing page, essentially with a first stop on my map journal here. So right now I'm going to click save in the upper right hand corner, save my story map. And now as I go, what I want to do is click here on the lower left corner and add sections. And so each new section will show up as a circle under this little house icon. Right, so we're going to build this narrative or sequence of sections. So we'll click on add section. And now my content, I'm going to set one of the maps here. So the first map, let's use our CO2 emissions in 2013. So here where it says map, select or create a map, I'll click here to grab that CO2 emissions. My section needs a title. Here at the top, I'll call it CO2 emissions per country. There's lots of options for customizing how the map behaves. For instance, if you want a legend to show up, you can do that. And then I'll click next. And then we're going to set up the side panel content. So just as a demo, I want to show you how you can actually embed a whole website into the side panel here. So let's embed a quiz from NASA about climate change and what people understand about it. So I'm going to go back to Google and search for NASA climate change quiz. And we're looking for carbon. Let's see, is this the right one? No, I want carbon dioxide. That's the one I'm looking for. It's here at the bottom. It's a gas. There it is. So I'm going to copy this URL now for this climate change quiz. Go back to my story map. And that camera icon, I can insert an image, a video, or a web page. So my media is just going to be a web page, and I'll copy and paste this link. And then select Configure. And we can fit it here in the panel, and then click Apply, and then Add. Sure. So from my side panel, I clicked here on the camera to insert an image, video, or web page. And then at the top, I said web page. And then just copied and pasted this link. And then I said configure and apply. And then save. So now I have my map that still has all the same functionality. That pop-up is totally interactive. The user can zoom in and out. It has a legend here in the upper right-hand corner. And I also have this website that people can go and interact with fully. Excuse me. So we can add another section. We can add our sea level rise map. So I'll click Add Section in the lower left-hand corner. And I'll call this section title Sea Level Rise. And my map, if I go to my drop-down, I need to select a map, which I can read through all of my different maps, sea level rise in Charleston. And then click on Next. Another thing I want to show you is you can embed video into the frame as well. And if you have the tab open for our workshops page here, Intro to Cloud Mapping and Story Maps, Create Your Story Map section. I've typed out some code here about halfway down that page above changing the settings for the layout of your story map. Is this code? It starts with a less than sign, says frame source equals HTTPS embed, yada, yada, yada. And so this is just a snippet of HTML that's going to create a frame in the side of that page and then embed this link from a video link from The Guardian talking about sea level rise. So did everybody find that bit of code? All right. So if I go back to my story map here, in the side panel content, there's this button, the source. And so from here, you can add or customize the raw HTML code. So what I'm going to do is just paste that snippet here. And I need to give my section, what is it telling me? Oh, I need to close my source button. And what I should see is a preview of the video show up here. So again, for my side panel content, I clicked on the source button, pasted that code snippet, clicked source again, and now I can click add. So here I have my sea level rise map and actually a video. I don't know if it'll play. Is my volume up? Anyway, there's a video that'll play here.
And he's directly measured
Yep, there he goes.
how high the sea level is going. and one of our most powerful tools for understanding human-caused climate change. The planet warming.
And so now as I scroll on the left in my side panel, I can go from section to section, or I can click directly on these sections and move around through my journal here. And that's really all it takes to build this story map. So we can also go to our settings here in the upper left corner. We can customize the appearance if we want. So if we click on settings, our first option is switch from a side panel to a floating panel. So if we click apply, you can see what that looks like. So, you know, if you prefer having a floating panel here, sort of lays over your maps, it's an option. If I go back to my settings, you can also change the width of the side panel, whether it's on the left or on the right. Under the theme, you have two options, black and white. But you can also customize the fonts that you use. And here at the header, this is going to modify that section at the top of your side panel. So you can give it a customized logo. The default is to use the Esri logo. So you could say my logo, and if you wanted to put a tiger paw, for instance, you go to Google, search for Clemson tiger paw. Right, copy an image link, copy our image address for one of these. And then here I want to select link to a logo. Oop, that's not it. That one didn't work for me. Try a different one. Need to select and delete all this text. You can customize the tagline. So by default, it has this tagline called a story map. You could say story map by your name. And you also have the option for links where people can directly share your story map to their Twitter, to their Facebook, or get a link to it. So I'll click apply. Right, there's my custom logo, my header, a story map by Blake. I'll save my story map. And then I can click here on share. It's already public. I can use this URL and send that to anybody for them to visit my story map. Or if I copy and paste it into a new browser tab, now I have that the way it's going to appear to anybody online. Oops. All right. So there we have it, our very own first story map. What do you think? Thanks. Pretty easy, right? I mean, here we have this fully customized, very professional looking website where really all we had to do was give it a few links and create our web maps here. So this is really just scratching the surface of what you can do in story maps. You can put story maps inside other story maps. There's all sorts of different formats and templates you can use. A lot of different stuff out there for you to try. From our workshops page here, there's There's some resources, lots of tutorials, videos, examples for you to visit beyond today. Let's see, the one thing I haven't shown you yet is, I meant to earlier, is how we embed a map. Let's see, I have too many tabs open now. How do we embed a map back in that Google site we created at the very beginning? Oh, no, I here, once we created our story map, it locked us into this interface. We need to go back to ArcGIS.com to open a map. So I'm going to tidy up and close a few tabs here really quickly. CO2 emissions. Here we go. There's a map. So if you need to, if you don't have any more maps open, just open a new tab, go to ArcGIS.com. You'll have to sign in again, which we've had plenty of practice doing now. I'm going to go to my content and open that CO2 emissions map once again. So I'll log in, go to my content, open that map, CO2 emissions in 2013, and then click here on this Open in Map Viewer. So at the top is this Share Map button. So we could create a web app out of it, which we've already done, or if we click this option, embed in a website. So we click here, what this gives us is the HTML code we can put into another website. And there's lots of options for functionality that you can switch on in that map. So here at the top, you can choose the size of the map. 500 by 400 will be a fairly small map, so I'm going to bump this up to 900 width by 600 height. And here's all these different options here. I'm going to turn on the base map selector. I want people to be able to choose their own base map. I'll check the box for a legend. And then you can choose your themes, a light or dark. So I'll select a dark theme. And then here in this box, I can just now click copy to automatically copy all of that code. And then I'll find my Google site, going way back to the beginning, and open this page, My Map from ArcGIS Online. And now I want to edit that page. So I'll click this pencil icon. And then I need to click here where it says edit the HTML source. So click that button, HTML. And then I'm just going to paste all of that code into the box. And now if I click on update, it's saying some tags are not permitted. We'll click OK. And then save the page. So now within this Google site I've created, I have, again, this same map. I can zoom in and out within it. All of my pop-ups are still the same way I've formatted them. I could change the base map if I wanted to. And I also have a legend to help me interpret my results, interpret the map. And again, you don't need to know a lot of coding to be able to grab that HTML and put it into a website. So we're really able to create maps and use them across a variety of different platforms. All right, so that's what I have for you today. Any questions, comments, thoughts before we wrap up? Any ideas on how you would use this yet? ArcGIS Online, story maps that you want to share? I know we talked about some. You want to share with everyone?
And I was actually thinking of using this for say presentations or policymakers to show how much what's the current situation of the area, and then how can you this scenario, the other scenario.
Mm-hmm. So really communicating the results of your modeling. Yep. Any others?
Go back to the moth collection to Congress.
Yeah, yeah.
Where there were.
Yeah, so we maintain that collection here, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's in the Open Park Network.
Yep. So there's a really cool collection of moths that were collected at Congaree National Park. They've documented all the species and everything. Want to showcase that collection. Very cool. Other ideas? All right. Well, as always, before you leave, I would just appreciate if you fill out the survey. Let's see if I put the link. I may have forgotten to type it out here, but oh, and I locked myself out of editing here. You could fill out that survey, please, at this link. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks for coming. The workshop next Friday is going to be on Tableau. So using an entirely different software platform, Tableau is a data analytics and visualization program. If you're a frequent user of Excel and don't like using Excel, Tableau is a really cool alternative that most people really love. And so we have a guest speaker, a PhD student in environmental engineering who's a Tableau is John Sherwood. He's going to come in and teach that one. So we'll have that next Friday, and then the following week is spring break. And then the final workshop in this series anyways, is going to be using drones and terrestrial laser scanning or LiDAR scanning for mapping. That'll be on the 30th. So, thanks. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a different question. I'm working on a project with story maps right now, and I was wondering if there's an option if I have like a map like this. Is there some way I can get hyperlinks? Like the idea is it's more or less like a little journey, like it's supposed to be a story and you have spots and they're more or less like traveling around. It's so the idea was that we have different spots that you can visit, and it would be nice to have it on the map and then click on it and then the side panel moves and you go to this spot. Do you know if I have the option to use and use drone maps? Because I know that I can have like a sequence here.
Thanks you.
But then I was wondering if I know that I can include stuff and it opens, but I was not sure if there's any way I can get links from
the
spots to
back to here.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I know you can have text or something here, and you click and it changes in the map. I'm not sure if you can go the other way. For each stop, are you looking to have lots of information?
Yeah, because it's supposed to be like a book almost. Have you ever read the Magic Treehouse series, like the books where you always have a decision? Like
Thanks. See you.
it's a chapter and then you have a decision, like,
like
do you
choose
want to
your own
go
adventure.
inside or do you want to go back?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like that. Or would you recommend to use maybe even Google Sites instead? But I also wasn't sure if I can include hyperlinks there.
That's interesting.